The Man Next to You. Original stories of ordinary people in extraordinary hours. The ones history forgets to name. Season 3, The Hot Land. Episode 6, The Far Shore. The order to come off the ridge didn't sound like anything, and that was how Sergeant Roy Bellamy knew it was real. He had braced his whole body for the island to take it back, had spent so many days learning that every quiet was a lie, that every lull was the hell breath before the next dark mouth opened up, that when the word finally came down the line, "You're relieved, the line's taken, come off the rock," he did not believe it. He waited for the coral to come alive one more time. And it didn't. The relief units moved up past them, fresh faces, clean uniforms, eyes that hadn't seen the ridge yet. And Bellamy's squad came down off Bloody Nose Ridge in the white light. And nothing happened, and nothing kept happening. And slowly the not happening became a thing he could almost let himself believe. "So that's it," Tex said, in the voice of a man poking something to see if it's dead. "We're off the rock. Did we win it? Is this what winning feels like? Because I gotta tell you, Roy, I expected to feel less like a chewed boot." "You feel thirsty," Bellamy said. "That's what winning feels like on this island. It feels exactly like thirsty." Key didn't say anything. The boy had gone quiet over the last days in a way Bellamy was keeping an eye on. Not the bad quiet, not yet. Just the quiet of a 17-year-old whose furniture had been moved. The kid had dragged a wounded enemy to a corpsman. The kid had walked water runs beside a man his country wouldn't seat at a lunch counter and learned his name. The kid had come across the reef a child in the island had spent weeks making him into something else. And now it was easing its grip, and he had to figure out how to carry it. Bellamy knew that job. Bellamy was still doing that job a war and a half later. "Come on, Key," Bellamy said gentle. "We're going down to the water. All the way down this time. Down to the far shore." He counted them as they went, the way he had counted them every hour of every day since the reef. His heart in his throat through every face. "Stay with me. We're almost there. Almost there." The path down off the ridge was the whole campaign laid end to end, and Bellamy walked it slow and for the first time saw the shape of the thing he'd been one small part of. Because going up, you only ever saw your own 20 yards. You saw your squad, your stretch of lip, the next dark mouth. But coming down, the whole of it unrolled alongside the path like a procession of everyone who'd kept them alive. And Bellamy, burned black, hollowed out, carrying names he'd carry forever, found himself doing something close to prayer, a wordless thank you aimed at strangers as the pieces went by. He passed the water path, the 400-yard furnace he'd watched the depot men climb 100 times with 40 pounds in each fist, and there at the bottom was a working party resting in what shade there was, and among them a big steady Marine that Bellamy knew. And he stopped. "Tate, Sergeant Bellamy." Moses Tate got to his feet. "You came off the rock. We came off the rock on your water." Bellamy put out his hand and Tate shook it, and Bellamy said it plain, because it needed saying once with no one needing to overhear it this time. "My squad's alive because you walked water up that path through a sniper's front yard 100 times and carried our hurt and our dead back down it. And nobody's gonna put that in a book. I'm putting it in my mouth right now so it gets said by somebody. Thank you. There was no rear on this island. You were in the fight every step of that path." Tate held his gaze a moment. "We carried who needed carrying," he said. "Same as you, Sergeant. Funny how that works." "Yeah," Bellamy said. "Funny how that works." He passed the foot of a draw where a cave had been sealed, the one on the shoulder that had pinned them and killed them until it went suddenly, mercifully quiet. And Bellamy stopped there too and looked at the slide of blasted coral that had been a dark mouth and thought of the man with the tanks on his back who'd run up that draw on the covering fire Bellamy's squad had poured out, the man who'd sat down shaking against the rock after, the man Bellamy had taken his helmet off to across the open because there'd been no other way to say what needed saying. He never had learned the name. Some flame and demolition man, some stranger who'd done the worst job on the island so that Bellamy's squad could come up out of their holes alive. Bellamy raised his hand to the sealed cave now. The way you'd salute, I know what you spent. I never knew your name. Thank you. And Key, beside him, watched him do it and understood. The way the boy understood most things now and raised his own hand too. He passed an aid station near the bottom, a hole in the coral where a corpsman was working a litter line, loading the last of the hurt for the trip out. And Bellamy knew that hole and that corpsman, Foley, who'd learned every man's name before the wound, who'd warmed plasma in his own armpits against the killing sun, who'd taken the enemy boy Key, dragged in and worked on him with the same hands and the same care and refused to let him be a number. Foley looked up and lifted a bloody hand, and Bellamy lifted one back, and neither of them said anything, because there wasn't anything that the weeks hadn't already said. And down at the waterline, where the path met the sand at last, the Amtraks were crawling in and out across the reef the way they had since the first morning. The steel boats that thought they were tanks, hauling the relief in and the wounded out. The artery that had never once closed in all those weeks, no matter how the island bled it. Bellamy watched one come grinding up onto the sand, a tired tractor with something painted small inside her, a tired corporal at the controls, and he thought of the first morning, of the Amtrak that had carried his first wounded off this exact beach, of the tractor man who'd slapped the side twice and given him a look across all the noise. Thank you, I'll never know your name. Take care of them. Maybe it was the same tractor. Maybe the same man. Bellamy couldn't tell from here and would never know. The reef men all blurred into one long act of crawling courage that nobody would remember to thank. And the prisoners, down by the water, in a wired pen under the eyes of a few tired Marines, was a cluster of them. The enemy, finally in the light, sitting in the sand. Defeated men. Young, most of them, the way they always turned out to be once you got them up out of the dark and into the daylight where you had to look at them. And Bellamy felt the complicated thing he'd been feeling since the first day, since the dark mouths in the ridge. That these were the men who'd been killing his squad from inside the earth for weeks, and that they were now just men, somebody's sons, somebody's Key. The convoy of his thoughts slowed, and in the slowing he found himself stopped near the wire. And there, close enough in to see, was a face he half knew. A young Japanese soldier, gut wound, bound and healing, burned along one arm, sitting in the front of the pen. The one Key had dragged out of the fire weeks ago on an instinct the boy couldn't name. The one Foley had refused to let be a number. The one who'd gone out on the Amtrak's steel floor, with his blood running into the same low corner as the Marine's blood, and come back, somehow alive, healed enough to sit in the sun and wait for whatever came after the worst weeks of his life. Key saw him too, went very still. The enemy soldier was scanning the Marines coming down off the ridge, the way the surrendered scanned their captors, and his eyes found Key's, the boy who'd dragged him, the face you don't forget, and stopped. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then the soldier lifted one hand, just a little, the bound arm an inch off his knee, not a plea this time, something else, an acknowledgement, almost an offering. You're the one who didn't let them. I'm still here because of the half second you took. And Key understood it, all at once and completely, and his throat worked, and he raised his own hand back. Open, empty, the oldest sign there is. The enemy soldier bowed his head once, slow and grave, and then a guard moved, and the line shifted, and the wire and the pen and the man slid behind them, and Key let his hand come down. That was him, Key said, from the first week, the one Yeah, Bellamy said. He lived. Doc's guy. He actually, the boy's voice did something. He's gonna go home. Someday this is gonna be over, and he's gonna go home. Because People keep what saves them, Key, Bellamy said. Sometimes it's a man who decided not to leave them in the fire. He's gonna carry you his whole life, same as you'll carry him. That's not a small thing you did. That might be the biggest thing anybody in this squad did on this whole rock, and it took you about 4 seconds and no rifle. They stood on the sand at the far shore, the squad, what was left of it, and Bellamy counted them one more time, the living, and let himself hold the names of the ones who weren't standing. He knew exactly who wasn't. He'd carry them the rest of his life. But they had come down off the ridge too. Everyone carried down that path on a working party's hands, because you do not leave a man on the rock. And Bellamy's squad had not left a single one. "We made it, Sarge," Keith said, looking out at the water, the ship standing off the reef, the way home. "We actually made it. We made it. I keep waiting to feel like we won." The boy's voice was careful, the careful of someone whose furniture had been permanently moved. "We took it. Why don't I feel like we won?" Bellamy looked at the kid, at the hollow eyes, at the man the island had made out of the boy who'd asked, "Did I do it right on the beach on the first morning a lifetime ago?" "Because winning's not the word for it," Bellamy said. "Nobody won this rock, son. We just didn't let it keep us. That's a different thing, and it's smaller, and it's harder. And it's the only thing that was ever really on the table here." He put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "You want to know what we did? We came across that reef, a bunch of men, and the heat and the thirst and the dark mouths in that ridge tried to take every one of us. And we got each other off the beach and up the rock and back down to the water. The walking and the hurt and the ones we lost, everyone. That's not winning. That's better than winning. That's keeping faith with each other when the whole island was built to make you stop." Key was quiet a long moment, looking at the ships. "Get off the beach," he said finally, almost to himself, "and bring your buddy with you." "You were listening," Bellamy said. "The whole time, Sarge. The whole rock. I was listening the whole time." "Good." Bellamy turned his burned face to the water, to the ships, to the far shore and the way home. "Then it took. Then maybe the whole thing was worth it after all." The boats took them off that hot island. The walking and the carried, the whole and the hurt, and somewhere among the litters going out, healing, bound for a cage instead of a grave. The enemy boy too, because the promise on this rock, in the end, had stretched even to him. Everybody off the beach, everybody down to the water, even the man who'd been in the dark. Roy Bellamy stood at the rail as the ship pulled away and watched the island fall back into the haze. The white reef, the bloody ridge, the dark mouths, the place that had wanted his squad and not gotten them. He was so tired and so thirsty that he could not feel his own face. Beside him, a boy he'd watched become a man looked back at the same ridge, and somewhere below them on the same ship a Marine named Tex was already complaining about the ship's coffee, which meant alive, the best sound in the world, and the ship carried all of them out toward the open sea and the long way home. He went home that next year, the ones like him who got to and got older, the way the lucky do. He worked and married and raised children who could not imagine him young or thirsty or afraid, and he told almost none of it. But on the hot nights, the still ones, the whole thing would come back to him at once the way it had unrolled along that path down off the ridge. The tractor men crawling the reef that never closed. The corpsman who learned every name. The depot men carrying water up through the sniper's front yard and the dead back down. The flame man who called into the dark first and the few who walked out because he did. And a 17-year-old who dragged an enemy out of the fire on an instinct he couldn't name. And an enemy boy in the sun lifting a bound hand in the oldest sign there is. None of them had known the others. That was the thing Bellamy understood. An old man in the still heat of a summer night. Each of them had only ever seen their own 20 yards. The tractor man on the reef, the corpsman in the hole, the water carrier on the path, the flame man at the cave, the rifleman on the lip. None of them had seen the hole. It had taken every one of them, every unnamed one, each doing the next thing and taking care of the man next to him, to turn that hot rock from a place that swallowed men into a place an army came off of, down to the water, to the far shore. And only the path going down had ever shown him the shape of it, only the end of it, only looking back. Get off the beach, he'd think, an old man in the dark, and bring your buddy with you. That was the whole war. That was the whole of everything, really. And he'd close his eyes and cross the reef one more time. And this time, every time now, for the rest of his life, every single man would make it off the sand. You've been listening to The Man Next to You. These people are fictional. What they carried was not. This was the final episode of Season 3, The Hot Land. Thank you for walking the whole island with me. Until then and always, take care of the man next to you.